right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Valentine's Day is right around the corner, and we thought it'd be fun to dive into,
Yeah.
how to navigate it. This day comes with a lot of expectations and pressure,
Right.
and sometimes it's not always the most enjoyable. So
Yeah.
we found some sources that give some pretty good advice on things you should avoid doing on Valentine's Day. Then we're going to
Okay.
flip that and talk about,
Yeah.
how to actually turn those don'ts into do's and hopefully, have a more enjoyable day for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think that's key. Valentine's Day, it can be so much fun, but it does come with, expectations and pressures. And sometimes it can lead to disappointment if it doesn't live up to the hype. So I think the key is really to focus on genuine connection and just enjoyment rather than striving for this picture perfect, Hallmark movie kind of day.
Yeah, and one of the things that our sources talked about was this idea of last-minute planning. And I know I've been guilty of this in the past where, it's the day for Valentine's Day and I'm frantically running around trying to find a card or a gift. And it just ends up feeling so not thoughtful.
Right. It's almost like an afterthought, and it just undermines the whole purpose of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely a big don't, is the last-minute planning.
Absolutely.
Another thing, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that, is this idea of overhyping the day. It's just one day out of the year, right? Why are we putting so much pressure on this one day?
Yeah, right. It's all of a sudden all of your romantic hopes and dreams are hinging on this one 24-hour period.
Yeah, and that's just a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And what's interesting? Some of the sources that we were looking at talked about how couples who celebrate a day or two before Valentine's Day often report feeling more relaxed and satisfied because they kind of get to avoid the crowds and the inflated prices, and there's this kind of fun anticipation leading up to the actual day.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Get out ahead of it.
Yeah.
Avoid the rush. Avoid the crowds.
Exactly.
And then, of course, you can't talk about Valentine's Day without talking about social media and the comparisons that inevitably come up. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap.
Absolutely.
Scrolling through Instagram and seeing these picture perfect Valentine's Day celebrations and feeling like my own plans are just totally inadequate.
It's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game, and it's these curated, idealized images that don't even necessarily reflect reality.
Right. So how do you recommend navigating that? How do you enjoy social media without letting it ruin your Valentine's Day?
Yeah, one thing that I think can be really helpful is a digital detox, even if it's just for a few days leading up to Valentine's Day, just kind of unplugging from that constant stream of perfect images and expectations.
Yeah, digital detox sounds great, but wouldn't you miss out on some fun Valentine's Day ideas or local events or things like that?
That's a good point. I think it's not necessarily about completely disconnecting. It's more about being mindful of your consumption, so maybe limit your social media time, unfollow accounts that, trigger those feelings of comparison, maybe even just turn off notifications for a while.
Right.
It's really about just protecting your own joy and focusing on what truly matters to you and your partner.
I like that, being mindful and intentional about your social media use.
Exactly.
Another thing that our sources talked about was this idea of not bringing up past issues on Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah. It's the worst time to rehash old arguments.
Right.
You want to set a positive tone for the day and really focus on celebrating your bond rather than dwelling on past conflicts.
Right. So if there are issues that need to be addressed, maybe schedule a separate time to have those conversations.
Exactly.
But keep Valentine's Day, light and fun and focused on the positive.
Yeah, for sure.
And then finally, one of the sources really emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting your partner's preferences because, not everybody wants a dozen red roses or a fancy dinner.
Right. Everyone has their own love language.
Exactly.
And it's really about figuring out what makes your partner feel loved and appreciated.
Yeah.
So it might be a home-cooked meal or a heartfelt letter or an experience that aligns with their passions, It's about making it personal and meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, kind of sum up what we've talked about today.
Yeah.
We're ditching the last-minute scrambling.
Yes.
We're managing those expectations, maybe even trying a mini digital detox.
Yeah.
And most importantly, remembering that Valentine's Day is really about celebrating the unique connection that you have with your partner.
Beautifully summarized. And I think as you're thinking about your own Valentine's Day plans, consider this. What small, meaningful gesture would make your partner feel truly seen and appreciated? It doesn't have to be grand or expensive. It just needs to come from the heart.
That's a great point, and I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Valentine's Day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next